everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is my Australian TBR. If you're looking for books by Australian authors, I've got you covered with a couple recs. It has always been my dream to go to Australia. My mom and I have been saving for this trip and we are going to Australia. We are about to leave. I think we leave in 4 days, which is actually insane. And we're going for almost a month. We're also going to New Zealand and Fiji. It's gonna be the trip of a lifetime, genuinely. So freaking stoked. Like I can't even start to express how grateful I am that this is happening and that I'm getting this opportunity. So with all that being said, I decided what better way to celebrate going to Australia than to read books by Australian authors and books that take place in Australia while I am there. I just think that's gonna be so fun. So that's kind of my goal, and that means that I have a TBR. It's pretty lengthy. I don't think I'll get to all of them. I will start with the books that take place in Australia. The very first book on my TBR is Pictures of You by Emma Gray. She lives in Canberra, Australia. Hopefully I'm saying that right. One of my favorite booktubers, Sarah Corelli, she actually read this and reviewed it, giving it 4 stars, and she said, I think this book is best to go into blind. It has a storyline that is so bingeable and chapters that are super short. You'll want to turn the page and find out what's happening next. Also, all I could think of was the song Heartbreak Girl by Five Sauce while reading this. Do what you will with that. That's a lot to unpack. First off, Five Sauce, I love them. And their new album, peak. Also, they are from Australia, so I'm really crossing my fingers that I just meet them on the street. Please make that happen. And I will follow Sarah's advice and just say that this book says it's kind of about second chances and what would have happened if you lived your life differently. And it takes place in Australia. Also by Emma Gray is The Last Love Note, is her debut novel, and everybody's like, are you kidding me? It's your debut. This is amazing. So this one is a story about a woman who tragically lost her husband and now she is a single parent and grieving. It's been about 2 years since the loss of her husband and she still just doesn't know how to pick up the pieces of her life. She ends up having flight problems and ends up with her boss in Australia for the weekend, and it's kind of just about her seeing if she can go back into love or if it's too soon. It will make listeners laugh, cry, and renew their faith in the resilience of the human heart and in love itself. I just think that might be a really great book, although I might be crying on the plane, but you know. The next book is called The Rosie Project by Don Tillman. This one, it looks so cute. So this one is about a professor of genetics. He has never had luck in love. He's never been on a second date. And he kind of has this idea that statistically there has to be somebody out there for him. And so he goes on a mission to try and find a woman that checks all of his boxes, who is, you know, XYZ and doesn't do XYZ. And he ends up meeting Rosie, who basically is the opposite of all of his boxes, but is looking for a DNA expert to help her find her biological father. And so they end up working together and maybe testing out some theories that they have about love and compatibility. And I just think that's kind of a really cute premise. And I have another favorite booktuber of mine, Reagan, who marked this book as 4 stars. So I'm very excited to see if I will also enjoy this book. Then I have 2 books by Rachel Johns, the first one being The Other Bridget, and this one says it is a feel-good romantic comedy by Australia's best-selling romance writer, ideal for fans of Emily Henry. So I love Emily Henry, so I'm thinking I'll absolutely love her, right? If they're comparing her to her, right? Seems like a no-brainer. The Other Bridget is about a woman who loves all things books, is a hopeless romantic, and she runs a library, I guess. She ends up starting to have like romantic feelings for this man Fabio, who is an Italian barista that she meets. And even though she's really bad at love, she's hoping that it will work. However, she has a cranky neighbor that keeps getting under her skin, and both of them aren't really readers, and so she decides she's gonna put her skills of matchmaking people with their favorite books to the test and try and get them to love a book. And you know, I guess it's a little bit of a love triangle. You're seeing who she ends up with. I am very interested in the premise. The next book on my list is also by Rachel Johns, and it's called The Bad Bridesmaid. This one looks so cute. It's like Parent Trap meets weddings. It's like the opposite of Parent Trap because Fred is asked to be the maid of honor in her mother's 6th wedding, and she's determined to make sure that this wedding does not succeed. She's like, I will ruin this wedding at all costs. And then she meets the groom's hot son, Leo, who is also dead set on ruining this wedding. And so they decide together to create Operation Breakup. And their whole goal is just to break up this marriage. Craziness ensues, maybe romance blooms, and I just think that could be a really fun time. And I just like that concept. That's kind of fun. Now, moving on to books that were written by Australian authors. So the first is a super well-known, almost classic at this point that I have not read yet, and that is The Book Thief. If you don't know anything about The Book Thief, I'm pretty sure it takes place during the Holocaust, and it's about like book burning that was occurring at the time, and possibly also Jews that were running for their lives. So that's been on my TBR for like forever. I mean, seriously, I don't know how I haven't read it yet. But if I'm feeling like crying during this trip at any point, I might book that one up and see what happens. Additionally, I found a young adult to children's book author, Melissa Keel, and she wrote 2 books that I put on this TBR. The first is The Incredible Adventures of Cinnamon Girl. Let me just read this synopsis for you. Alba loves her life just as it is. She loves living behind the bakery and waking up in a cloud of sugar and cinnamon. She loves drawing comics and watching bad TV with her friends. The only problem is she's overlooked a teeny detail. Like the guy she thought long gone has unexpectedly reappeared. And the boy who has been her best friend since forever has suddenly gone off the rails. And even her latest comic book creation is misbehaving. Also, the world might be ending, which is proving to be awkward. As doomsday enthusiasts flock to idyllic Eden Valley, Alba's life is thrown into chaos. Whatever happens next, it's the end of the world as she knows it. I just think that's really cute. It's just basically like a comic book YA novel, and I'm down. She also wrote Life in Outer Space. This book is also YA, and it's about Sam, this super geek movie buff guy who is super uncool. But one day, this girl, Camilla, moves to town and decides that he's gonna be cool. And so now him and his friend group kind of like move up in the ranks, and Sam and Camilla become best friends, and kind of like a romance blooms. But Sam kind of has to decide if he wants to ruin the friendship with Camilla and see what can happen, or just keep what they have now. I just think it's cute. YA books fill me with joy and I enjoy them, so I'm excited to see what Life in Outer Space holds. Now, I also found out some of my favorite childhood books were by Australian authors. I had no idea. So the first is the Ranger's Apprentice series by John Flanagan. I adored this series growing up. I think it has 12 books in it, or 13, and it's just so good. It's so good. It's kind of just about this guy who goes into training to become a ranger, and it's like he has this like gruff old like man that's teaching him how to do things, and a ranger is kind of, think like assassin bowman. Okay, and then his best friend is a soldier, chorus, I think. And really just they go through so much within those books. And I cried and I laughed, and it was one of my favorite times growing up. So I have contemplated rereading the first book, maybe even rereading the whole series I adored as a child. But John Flanagan is apparently from Australia, is an Australian, so that's really, really cool. Additionally, Alison Goodman, who is the author of Eon and Iona, which I absolutely adored growing up, is also Australian, and she wrote a different book, which I have put on this TBR, called The Benevolent Society of Ill-Mannered Ladies. Now, this one does take place in England, so I'm not entirely sure if I will read it on this trip exactly, but as far as I loved her writing growing up and that she's from Australia, I figured I would put it on this list. This one is basically about a pair of women who are in their early 40s, unmarried, and they are bored of society life and tired of being discarded because they're unmarried still. And so her and her twin sister decide that they are going to spice up their life, and they get involved with this murder trial with this man who was exiled to Australia 20 years ago, and they think that he's been wrongly accused of murder, and so they decide to try and find the evidence to prove him not guilty. So I'm really excited to see what these girls get up to. So the last book on my TBR is actually a Christmas book that takes place in Australia, which is super fitting because I will be in Australia for most of December. So this one is called The Christmas Swap by Sandy Barker, and it's about 3 women who became friends at a Maui kids resort, but they are from 3 very distinctly different places, and at 33, they've decided, what if we swapped houses, very the holiday, for Christmas? And so all 3 of them decide to swap. Chloe from Melbourne spends her Christmas in England with Lucy's family. Lucy spends her Christmas in Colorado, and Jewel leaves Colorado for Melbourne. Isn't that so cute? So yeah, I love Colorado. I will hopefully love Melbourne, and London is just perfect. So I'm very excited to see how they all spend their very distinctly different Christmases, and also the kind of like dynamics of being with an unfamiliar family, and maybe things are a little bit different or they get homesick. And so yeah, very excited to read that one. If I had to pick one book I'm the most excited to read, it's probably that one. Yeah, it's just actually perfect, especially because we'll be in Australia, but it won't feel like it'll feel like we're visiting for Christmas, because we are. So it'll be like the exact same feelings that this girl is going through. That brings us to the end of my Australian TBR. Please, again, like I said, let me know in the comments below if you have read any of these books or have any other Australian authors or Australian placed books or New Zealand placed books that you recommend. I'm super excited to try out these new authors. I'm ready to find my next favorite book. I think this is a fun little challenge to get me a little bit out of my comfort zone of, I realized I read mostly American authors, so I am excited to see what the Down Under has to offer for the authors and the readers. And I'm pretty sure that that was the worst Australian accent you guys will ever hear. So on that note, thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.